Hello, I'm Nobby Clark. Welcome to my workshop. I've braved the elements to come out here today. It's really cold, it's in minus temperatures today. But I wanted to sort of talk a little bit about the workshop and a little bit about me as well. I retired in 2010, unfortunately retired a bit early because I was made redundant from my job about 2.5 years before I was really officially due to retire. I tried for a couple of years to find another job, but to no avail. And when I came into my proper retirement, after a while I decided really I needed to find an interesting hobby to keep me occupied and to keep my brain working. So in I think it was in 2014, I decided to try amateur engineering and model engineering. It's an interest I've had for a long time, really, since I suppose my school days, really, and the job I did for most of my career was selling products made to very, very high engineering standards. So this sort of increased my interest, I suppose, over my working years, but I wasn't really able to do much about the hobby really until my retirement. So I thought, to give it a try, I'd buy myself an inexpensive small lathe. I looked around, looked on eBay at what was available, and I bought myself a Unimat SL lathe. These are tiny little lathes that could literally be used on a kitchen table indoors, and that's almost what I had to do to start with. My wife let me use one small end of our kitchen as a little mini workshop. I started using the lathe. I made quite a few bits and pieces with it, and I really enjoyed it, but it soon occurred to me that really, although the lathe was really good, made to very, very high standards and would do very fine, accurate work, it really wasn't big enough for the work that I wanted to do. So I thought, well, I really need to look around for something slightly larger. In 2016, we decided that I would have a workshop built in our back garden. The workshop was built in May of 2016, and prior to this, in the February of the same year, I started looking around for a slightly larger lathe. I decided on one of these lathes. This is a Chinese mini lathe. It's, I think, a 7x14 lathe. I spent months trying to find one at the right sort of price. I didn't mind buying one that wasn't in perhaps the best of condition in appearance, because I didn't mind having to sort of give it a good clean up and do whatever was necessary to get it working. Eventually I found this lathe. It was being sold by the son of a deceased gentleman that had a workshop in his garage, and his son was selling everything in the garage basically. There was a lathe and bench drill, compressor, all sorts of things, but I could only really bid for the lathe. That's really all I really wanted to do to start with. So I had to travel all the way down to Poole in Dorset to pick the lathe up. I met the chap down there, and we went into the garage, and the garage was in an incredible mess. the lathe was over on the bench there. It was filthy dirty. I don't think it had been used for quite a long time. And he said, well, I'm sorry, when I would have actually have brought the lathe up to you, because we discovered that we both lived not that far apart. But he said I couldn't really offer to do that because I had no idea what went with the lathe. So he sort of left me in the garage while he was sorting things out to try and find all the bits and pieces that went with it. Well, the lathe basically just had the 3-jaw scroll chuck. I rummaged around the garage and found the drill chuck for it, some spanners and various odd bits and pieces. Now the chuck should have had 3 external jaws as well, but as much as I was there for a couple of hours, and we both searched around and could only find 2 jaws. So in the end I decided, well, there's nothing I can do. I'll just have to sort of see if there's some way I can get hold of the extra jaws for it later on. Anyway, we put the lathe in the back of my car. Then he said, well, have a look around if there's anything else in the workshop that actually goes with the lathe. He said, you know, just help yourself to it. And he was a very, very nice, very accommodating young man. And I found some old tobacco tins up on a shelf with loads of taps and a few dies and all sorts of bits and pieces. And he said, no, just take them all. He said, they're going to be no use to me, and it's going to be more of a bother to try and sell those items separately. So I chucked those in the back of the car as well. Since bringing the lathe home, I spent, when I hadn't got the workshop built at this stage, I picked this up in February of 2016, and I spent a long time cleaning it up as best I could. It's not in too bad a condition. The chip guard at the back here was in rather poor shape. It is again actually, but I did take that off and I repainted the back of it and gave it a really good clean up. And it was running fine, it was running perfectly, no problem there at all. The first accessory I bought for it was a very, very inexpensive quick change tool post. A friend of mine that has a workshop in London said to me, you know, if you're getting a lathe, the first thing you must buy is a quick change tool post. It came with the original 4-way tool post that's normally supplied with these. So I bought this. It comes as a set, the tool post itself, and it came with 4 tool holders, one with a cut-off blade, a couple of sort of regular tool holders, and one to take a boring bar. So I used all of those, but like everything else, and on my big lathe, you soon find that a couple of tool holders is just not enough. So I thought, well, they're not that complicated. So I thought, well, I'll make some more. That's one of the ones that I made. I made them in batches of about 3 or 4 at a time. In fact, I ended up, I think it's something like about 16 tool holders that I built in the end. Lots of spare ones as well. I did have a lot more lathe tools mounted in them, but some of them I'm also using on my bigger lathe as well now. I watch lots of videos on YouTube for people that have these Chinese mini lathes, and various suggestions they have of improvements you could make to them. One very useful device I saw that somebody had made was a winding handle to wind the main shaft of the lathe that goes into the hole at the back here, and you've got a little screw that you tighten up. You've probably seen these items on YouTube anyway, and as you tighten this up, it expands this cone shape here and expands these out to lock in, so that you can wind the chuck round while you're tapping material. Very useful thing to have. One problem I did find, which another guy on YouTube found an answer to, is that when you're drilling material with quite large drills, it puts a lot of pressure on the tailstock and tends to push the tailstock back. Though you've got the lock on, it can push the tailstock down. So I built what this chap had suggested building was this device here, which is a bar of brass mounted through the ways of the lathe with a mount underneath, so that once you've got this in the tailstock in position, you can push this up and then lock the bolts to hold that in, and it will stop the tailstock from sliding back, so that it will hold in position and the tailstock's not being pushed away while you're drilling. So very, very useful addition. The one he made, he actually made this thing attached to the tailstock, so that the two items would move together, but I opted to make it as a separate item that I could just push in place, because you don't need to use that all the time. If you're using sort of fairly small drills and there's only a light pressure, there isn't really a problem. Although you probably won't be able to see it very easily, there's a piece of plastic mounted to the carriage here to catch chips and stop them from falling onto the ways of the lathe, where you can draw that right in, so you've got plenty of sort of coverage underneath the chuck. I've added a few accessories to it over a period of time. I did manage to get hold of a set of outside jaws for it as well. I later on bought a 4-jaw independent chuck for it. I've also got a face plate and a fixed steady for it as well. The faceplate I've used a few times. The fixed steady, it's a handy thing to have if you need it, when I haven't had a need for it so far, but if you suddenly needed it and you could get your hands on it quickly, it's going to be a bit of a nuisance, but it's a sort of a handy accessory to have on hand. There's nothing much else that I've done really, apart from fitting. It has a spindle speed readout on here, which after I've had it a few years, this stopped working. It's such a handy thing to have on here, so you can monitor the speed of the spindle. So I bought another digital readout, which you can probably see this flashing here. I mounted that up on the shelf here, and mounted the sensor in the back of the lathe here to read off part of the sort of really in the change gears are. The annoying thing was that once I got this set up and started using it, I happened to knock the top here. It's not going to do it now, but this came back on again. So there's obviously something loose inside here, perhaps a bad wire connection or whatever, I don't know, but I'm not very good with electronics, and I didn't really want to get inside this to try and figure out what the problem was. You know, once I've built this, it doesn't really matter. It works perfectly well, and I've checked this device with a handheld RPM meter as well. It works fine. The lathe didn't have this cover on the end here that obviously is to protect you from getting caught in any of the gears at the end. But the importer of this, a company called Amadeal, they're in the East End of London, and on a visit to London many years ago now, I called in on them. In fact, while I was there, I bought the steady rest and the back plate for it. I asked them if they had any spare covers, and the guy said, "Well, yes, you know, we have got them." He said, "Well, you know, I told him I bought this old second-hand Amadeal lathe, and he said, well, if you're not worried about it having I think there's a little crack in it here. There's a bit of tape on. There's a crack of there. He said, if you're not worried about that, there's one you can have that." So I got the back cover for free, which is rather nice. It was a strange coincidence, really, but I also wanted a milling machine. So having bought this in February, installed this in the workshop in May of 2016, I had the workshop running for a couple of months and started looking around for a second-hand milling machine. The milling machine, I've already done a video on that. It was the first video I did on YouTube, was on some upgrades and improvements I made to the milling machine, but as fate would have it, the milling machine is an Amadeal machine as well. So strange that I ended up with two machines from the same supplier. The milling machine obviously was bought second hand, but the guy that I bought the milling machine from had only had the milling machine for about a month. He bought it for specific projects, which he then decided it wasn't really big enough for that application, so he decided to sell it, and he said he was going to just use the milling machine at work. He had access to a Bridgeport machine, so I was quite lucky. The milling machine was almost brand new and had hardly any use at all, and the milling machine gets an incredible amount of use in my workshop. When I bought my big lathe, I had considered selling the Chinese mini lathe, but I thought, well, I'm not going to get very much money for it. It's not in fantastic condition. I don't care what it looks like as long as it works well. So I thought, well, let's just hang on to it, and it has paid dividends, because often I've been working on a project on the big lathe and then needed to do something else at the same time. So rather than mess around removing something from the chuck, which is not a good thing to do, or putting another chuck on the big lathe, I can just move to this one, and I've made so many things with this over the last few years. It works very, very well indeed. It's not possibly as accurate as my big lathe, but really I don't find any real problems with it at all. I think it's these lathes, there must have been hundreds of thousands of these lathes sold worldwide. So many people use them and produce very, very fine work with them. Going back to the Unimat lathe, I still had that when the workshop was built, and I brought it into the workshop. There was sort of the intention of using the Unimat as well, but having sort of in the end 3 lathes, I thought, well, no, it really needs to go. And in fact, I sold that on eBay, and in fact it sold for more than I paid for it. I had added a lot of accessories to it during the time I had it, so I was able to use the money I got from that to put towards other pieces of equipment in the workshop. Not much more I can tell you about this really. There's been so many videos on YouTube concerning these Chinese mini lathes. People have converted them to CNC machines and changed the motors on them to 3-phase motors. So much adaptability with them. Then I would sort of highly recommend this as a lathe to start off with, really. And they're quite compact because it's very heavy. I mean, I have trouble actually moving it off the bench now. I can slide it along the bench. I have to slide it up against the wall when I'm using the milling machine, so that I don't restrict the movement of the milling machine. But there we are. I mean, I hope that's been of interest. Just a sort of a little bit of a background on this lathe, and a little bit about how I got started with it as well. So again, thank you very much for joining me in the workshop today. I'm sorry about the video last week. I had to put a video I'd already shot earlier in the year of one of the engines at the Milton Keynes Museum. Last weekend it really was so cold, I couldn't get into the workshop. It was doubtful whether I'd get into the workshop this weekend as well, because it is so cold. It's actually been snowing where I live, but it's raining today, and I think hopefully the rain will wash the remainder of the snow away. Again, thank you for everyone that's subscribed to my channel. If you haven't already subscribed, please do. I'd be delighted if you would. And also thank you very much for all the very nice comments that you've made about my videos. And this is literally the last weekend before Christmas, so to everyone that's watching this, I wish you a very happy Christmas and a happy and safe and peaceful new year. And there may not be another video from me for a couple of weeks now, but if the weather does improve and gets a little bit warmer, I might be able to get back out into the workshop and get some more projects made. But until then, bye bye for now.